have been a plethora of operators added to Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege, but none have sparked just as much controversy as Jackal. Having been introduced in Operation Velvet Shell in early 2017, this attacking 3-speed 1-armor operator has been a constant in debate throughout the community for nearly a decade. His unique gadget and strong selection of weapons have been a scourge on the dreams of defenders, and a blessing for attackers facing defending roamers. From being nerfed several times to being banned in nearly every match from Copper to Champion, Jackal is almost guaranteed to get a groan from defenders when they see him on the attacking team. So today, we're going to be discussing the entire history of Rainbow Six Siege's most hated operator. February 7th, 2017, the day all Kavaria mains had their absolute worst nightmares come true. Jackal was introduced as part of Operation Velvet Shell, bringing an incredibly unique ability to the attacking team and its operators. It all starts with Jackal's crown jewel, the Inox Model 3. This gadget allows him to scan the footprints of a defender, leading to a constant ping on the exact location of the defender those prints belong to. This was an ability that had never been seen before in Rainbow Six Siege, allowing attackers to be able to track and seemingly hunt down roaming defenders. And who doesn't like the sound of that, besides opposing defenders? Although there were other operators like IQ that allowed the player to see enemy devices around the map, Jackal took intel a step further by providing actual tracking of enemy players, which was a total game changer, completely shifting the gameplay of the entirety of Siege itself. His gadget essentially forced defenders to choose one of two options: stay in the objective area, putting oneself at risk of other enemy attackers, like Fuse with his bombs and allowing attackers free reign of most of the map, or risk being exposed because of your footprints outside of the objective, alerting all attackers of your presence. It kind of became a no-brainer for players who had to fight Jackal, because a 1v1 between yourself and someone who knows exactly where you are is usually not so fun. Now, defenders who had already prioritized roaming around the map without a care in the world had to change their strategy entirely, which led to a change in the meta of popular operators chosen. Players now had to factor in the idea of potentially being tracked, adding an extra layer to the complexity of defending. Ever since his introduction in early 2017, the community's reaction to his introduction was varied, to say the least, with those who heavily relied on defending rounds being less than happy about the idea of being hunted down by an attacker. As I mentioned earlier, the main type of defender to be directly countered by Jackal's ability were roamers, and those who liked to sit outside of the objective, both of which had complete shake-ups upon his introduction. The hunters had now become the hunted, and they were not happy. The Inox Model 3 could reveal their location to the entire attacking team, essentially disallowing them from flanking around or sneakily picking off attacking stranglers. This led more players opting to play more on-site operators, setting up shop within the bomb site itself instead of roaming around the outside of the area. Another aspect defenders had to be more conscious about with a Jackal present was more effective communication, with roamers having to communicate with their teammates to ensure that they had an escape route just in case they were tracked. As opposed to defenders, many who favored attacking welcomed Jackal and his ability with open arms, countering roamers with ease. Some attackers, however, saw Jackal as a one-trick pony of sorts, believing that his ability was only ever useful if the defenders were heavily relying on roaming around the map, and that there was barely any reason to use him in any other circumstance. This discussion was enforced further by the discovery of how older footprints yielded less pings of a tracked defender. Many attackers who believed him to be completely useless if all defenders remained on site, essentially making one operator on the attacking team null and void in terms of abilities. In contrast, higher-ranked players saw Jackal as a necessity due to the frequency of roaming and one-man armies camping outside of the site. Ever since his release, Jackal has always been a controversial point of discussion within the community, with many arguing that he and his abilities and weapons were overpowered, resulting in many players not even being able to play as him. Let me explain. If you've ever played a ranked game of Rainbow Six Siege, which if you have then I'm so sorry, then you would be well aware of the pick and ban system in competitive game modes. Ever since 2018, players on both teams have been allowed to ban one defender and one attacker each. Ever since this system's introduction, you'd be hard-pressed to ever see Jackal not be banned. Statistically speaking, Jackal is by far the most banned operator in the game, holding that #1 spot for many, many seasons. Defenders took it upon themselves to ban him because of his innate capability to find roamers, but additionally, Jackal essentially became default pick for players who did not really have anyone in particular in mind to ban, but wanted to ban an operator anyway. Also, his smug smile in his operator portrait doesn't help his case. This makes sense from a defensive standpoint, however, because with how powerful Jackal and his abilities had become, it was pretty much impossible to roam without constantly having to look over your shoulder. There was a certain anxiety about being a roamer with the Jackal around, with roamers having to scramble away or run back to the objective as fast as they possibly could if they ended up being tracked. If a team started a rank match defending, you could bet your bottom dollar that Jackal would be banned to allow the defending team to have roaming the map as an option. It eventually got so bad in higher ranked lobbies that Jackal was getting banned in essentially every single match, leading to Ubisoft having to discuss internally regarding balance changes in order to lower his ban rate. Focusing on potentially adjusting his gadget's abilities, Ubisoft had obviously heard the outpour of criticism towards Jackal, resulting in their many attempts to balance him over the years, accumulating in several nerfs of the character. One of the main balance changes they attempted was altering how long one of Jackal's scans would take, as well as how often a tracked defender would be pinged. Originally, Jackal's tracker would have the defender pinged multiple times over a long period, but this was changed and minimized to allow defenders more of a fighting chance against Jackal. Another nerf of Jackal was a limitation on how many times Jackal could scan and track a defender. This made players that use Jackal think twice before going through with a scan on a set of footprints. In terms of Jackal's kit itself, his C7E assault rifle was nerfed a few times because it really was one of the best guns in the entire game. Back in the day when every operator and their mother had an ACOG on their weapons, the C7E especially benefited from having this powerful sight. Low recoil, high fire rate, and the fact that Jackal was the only operator to have access to this weapon, players were quick to jump on the opportunity to play him just to use it, not to mention that the gun looks really, really cool. So picture this, you have an amazing assault rifle with an ACOG as your primary weapon, and you have a secondary shotgun that you can use to break destructible walls, making finding roamers that much easier. The nerfs first added additional recoil to the gun itself, and then the AR's ACOG was removed shortly after, just like with many other operators' weapons throughout the game. These balances and changes led to less players choosing to play as Jackal, because rather than being overpowered, he was seen as being more situational than before due to his limited amount of scans. Many players, however, felt that Ubisoft's approach to balancing Jackal was too menial, and that Jackal required a huge overhaul rather than small balance changes. Thus, the hatred toward Jackal stems from multiple different factors. First, his Ionox Model 3 became the bane of many defenders' existence, often completely changing the game, forcing them to alter their playstyles. Roamers, when Jackal was present, were often seen as total liabilities due to their many footprints laying around waiting to be scanned. Operators that could sit on site without a care in the world if they were being tracked were seen as far more viable when a Jackal was on the attacking team. Finally, newer players often particularly disliked Jackal because of their lack of experience and awareness of how to counter him. Even today in Rainbow Six Siege, Jackal is still seen as a nuisance by many defenders. Though countless operators have been added to the game throughout the years, none have come quite as close to Jackal's skill in tracking roaming defenders. Though he may not be banned as much as he used to be, due to in part some newer operators being equally as annoying to play against, like Lion, who also has a tracking ability, Jackal is still banned in many ranked matches that take place in the current day, with many clinging to a force of habit of sorts. It should be noted that because of how long Jackal has been in the game, many players have found different ways to counter him. Mute Signal's Disruptor completely disrupts Jackal's Inox, and Caveira's Silent Step ability does not leave footprints when activated, allowing for her to sneak up on Jackal players. Despite these countermeasures, Jackal is still used constantly due to his ability and overall kit. Players are used to Jackal at this point in a way, especially experienced ones, so the fear and anxiety that once was isn't as present as it used to be. No matter what kind of Rainbow Six Siege player you are, everyone has a different opinion on this controversial operator. Many players see him as a necessary evil of sorts, where in a game with plentiful roamers, there has to be at least one operator that directly counters them. Others argue that Jackal's existence is a stain on the so-called heavenly balance that some believe the game has to uphold, and that he offers attackers an unfair advantage. No matter what changes or balances Ubisoft makes to this character, no one opinion regarding him will be the same as another. Jackal will always be a point of contention when it comes to how Ubisoft should handle operators directly countering each other, constantly sparking discussions about him and the balance of the game. In conclusion, Jackal's influence on Siege is and always will be gargantuan. Through his unique gadget, he completely changed how the game is played and continues to be defending roamers' worst nightmare. Though the title of most hated operator is subjective and everyone has their own opinion, Jackal will always hold a spot in many players' lists of most annoying operators to play against. His story will always be a prime example of how difficult it is for Ubisoft to transfer the fine line of balance in the game, and how sometimes players just want scapegoat. Even if he were to be entirely reworked in the future, he will always be known as at least one of Rainbow Six Siege's most hated operators, for the thousands of online forums and articles complaining about him, and the countless times he's been banned and ranked. It'd be impossible to not consider him worthy of that title.